Hello everyone, this is Omnixius, and I am the writer of the Dragon Knight Prophecy that you can read for free in royalroad.com. And I wanted to discuss me and why that negative review hit me so hard the other day, and just the fallout of what came about of that. So, in order to truly grasp why this mattered so much to me, you need to understand something. And that is, I always wanted to write, even all the way back, as far back as I can remember to the third grade. I used to draw little comics, and I used to write little text captions underneath them explaining the scene, and I would link little stories this way. The problem is all through my youth, my teachers, my parents, my friends, they all told me that this was garbage, that I was wasting my time, I had no talent in drawing, and I had no talent in storytelling. As I got into the higher grades, like in the 5th grade, for example, there was an actual class on writing a short story. And I wrote a short story, and I got an F. And my teacher, I spent a ton of time on this. I wrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And the teacher wrote on the top of the thing, said, spend more than 10 minutes on this next time. And I had spent we had given the project with like a 2-week leadway. And I had spent virtually every free minute that I didn't have to do something else working on that story. I probably had 50 hours in it. I probably had as many hours in that story as the whole rest of my class had combined in their stories. And the teacher accused me of only spending 10 minutes on it. So, moving on, when I got into the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they used to have a writing contest every year where you could write a story, submit it to the school. The school would pick, the top 3 people would get, these awards, and then the actual top person's story would go on to like a wider writing contest in the state. And I submitted to that every year, and I found out that my submissions were being pulled by my English teacher because the English teacher said that my stories were so bad he didn't want to embarrass me by letting other people see them. So... So, I've got that now. And, my friends read some of my stories and they used to laugh and, oh my God, these are so bad. These are so horrible. And, and the final nail in the coffin was I found out my mother had been reading some of them. She had been sneaking into my room, and because I used to just write them in notebooks and they'd be on my desk. And she would flip through some of them. And I caught her reading one day. And, we had this very serious moment. And, she, you need to sit down. We need to have an honest conversation. And she just flat out told me, you need to stop this. You need to stop writing. You're wasting your time. You're just going to hurt yourself. When I read your stories, I just want to cry at how bad they are. And I stopped writing. That was it. I was done. That was the nail in the coffin that ended it. And, with my artwork, I went on to, I took art every year I could going into high school. And I didn't take it my senior year because in the year before, my art teacher finally pulled me aside and said, look, you have no future in this. You have no talent. You can't draw. You have no concept of perspective. You have no grasp of art. And the thing is I had just drawn something that I thought was amazing. I loved it. And I thought it was, as far as my growth in artwork, I thought it was my crowning achievement at that point. It was the best thing I'd ever drawn. And I told them, I said, look, I wanted to put this. The school had a little art contest every year, where they would take, everybody could submit something they had made that year, and they would set a room aside, and people could walk around and pick they could pick 10 pieces that were their favorites, and the ones that got the most selections would win prizes. He refused to take anything from me. He refused to take any of my artworks, and I really wanted this thing in there, so I went over his head because the contest rules said that any student enrolled in the art program could submit one thing. It didn't say it needed to be approved. It just said I could submit one. So I went over his head, and the principal told him he had to take something. So I submitted my artwork, and magically somebody broke into the closet those things were all being stored in and took just mine out and vandalized it. And I spent probably 12 hours crying and slowly trying to erase the vandalism because this was my crowning achievement. It was also the last thing I ever drew. I dropped out of the art class that year, and I didn't take it the last year. So that was I actually haven't drawn since then. I got myself a little drawing pad to do sketches in, but I've sketched on like the first 3 pages and then just give it up, because as I do it, I hear all these voices in my head about how I shouldn't be doing this. You can't draw. You've got no concept of art, and I put it aside and I can't do it. But so I went like 10, 15, 20 years and never draw or wrote again. And then I encountered a video from Kelly Rice. And Kelly Rice talked about her writing process. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but at a certain point, I started dabbling at writing again. But I kept trying to make outlines because that's something the schools had hammered into my head. And I thought, because I never made outlines before, maybe this is when my stories sucked. So for a few years, I started to try to write stories by writing outlines, and it didn't work. It was a nightmare. I couldn't get anything done. But then I encountered the Kelly Rice. And she writes under the name KM Rice. And she had a video on her writing process. And I'm going to make a concession here and talk about just how horrible a person I am. When I saw her stuff come up on YouTube, I was enthralled by it not because of the title of her video or anything, but because of her thumbnail, because her face is there and she's a pretty woman. She just hits that right appeal to me, you know what I mean? But so I clicked on that and I started watching it, and I listened to what she was saying, and I realized she was basically saying she doesn't use an outline. She makes some notes, she writes down some ideas, but she lets her subconscious write for the most part, and she lets it go where it needs to go. So I was stunned. It was like, this, you can write this way? This is a proper way to go? So that's how you got the Dragonite Prophecy. This is my first effort to write the way Kelly says to write. The way Kelly says she writes. She doesn't say this is the way everybody should write. She just says this is her way. And that other people's methods might be similar, or borrow elements of her process, but that everybody ultimately has their own process. But so she set me free, and I started writing. And then, ultimately, I tried to get agents. I submitted material. I could go on and on and on with all, like, for example, I have 2 friends who are writers. They write historical fiction. I let them read 2 of my chapters, the first 2 of the Dragonite Prophecy. They hated it. Hated my characters, hated the premise, hated the scenes. I didn't describe anything. I didn't tell any story. They didn't know who anybody was. Gersius was a wimp. Lily was a crybaby. They just shredded it. I went to a writer's group, the local library, and I let some of the people there read the first 2 chapters. And I got called a misogynist. I got called a monster. People refused to come to the group if I was going to be there, so I stopped going to that. This is my Dragonite Prophecy story. But I ultimately gave some of the chapters to Kelly, and Kelly said the exact opposite. She took the time to say, look, there's things you can correct here, storytelling wise, but this is a good story. It needs to be told, and you need to finish this. So she's the first person in my entire life who ever gave me an ounce of encouragement. And I kept writing and writing and writing, and I went back and I cleaned up book 1 as best I could. I went back and cleaned it up again, and then I went back and cleaned up the first 5 chapters like 4 times. And they're still full of errors, but I did my best. And I started submitting it to agents. And 100 agents later, I think I'm at 102 right now. It might be 6, but nobody's even remotely interested in the story. In fact, I've gotten a few hostile responses from agents as well about the nature of my story and what a terrible person I am. So, I at this point was going to give up. I wasn't going to do any more writing again. It was like, this was another wasted effort. And then I met a person online in a video game, in Minecraft of all places, who wrote stories and posted them on Royal Road. He suggested I go there and said, if you just want people to read your story and tell you what they think, put it up there. He's like, you're going to get negative reviews because there's trolls. And so thus I was warned. But he said, just throw it up there. Let people know. So I did. And I started to get the most amazing reviews. I started to get people who were like, this is a really good story. I really like this. Please write more of it. And I can't tell you how happy that made me. I can't tell you how it fanned the flame of me wanting to write and wanting to tell this story. So, and I got some negative, reviews from people. I got some negative feedbacks, but they were always negative in the sense that they were polite. They were like, look, I liked your story in the beginning. I kind of liked where you were going, but you didn't go where I wanted you to go with this story, and thus it's not for me. Well, that is a very adult and a very polite point of view, and I appreciate that. Because no story is for everybody. And, so I started off with the right groundwork for the person that kind of made them believe I was going to go where they wanted it to go, but then I didn't, and they realized I'm not going to read this anymore because it's not for me. That is a very adult way of going about things, and I appreciate that. But this guy in his review, when I read what he had to say, he said it in just the right way and communicated it with just the right amount of venom that he dredged up all those negative feelings from my childhood, from my parents, from my teachers, and even from the earliest people who looked at my story, the first couple of chapters. He managed to dredge all that to the surface, and it hit me all at once. And it made me think to myself, oh my gosh, I'm just kidding myself. I've got blinders on. I'm being delusional. This story is garbage, and I'm humiliating myself publicly now. And it really hit hard. It really hit hard. But then the logic set in. It's like, wait a minute. You've got one bad, truly bad review. And you've got like 30 glowing reviews, Let's do a comparison here. You've been trolled. You've absolutely been trolled. But I took a couple of days off just to cool off, to make sure my head was clear, because if it's not, I write like garbage. And then the day I came back to write, my internet connection was down. And it took me 16 hours to fix it and get it all back up and running. So I literally got up one morning and said to myself, you're getting back in the saddle. You're going to get this writing done. You're not going to let this keep you down. Nothing's going to stop you today. You are going to get the next chapter done. You were going to get it up, and you were going to get over this problem. I was fired up, ready to do it. I had no internet connection. The network was down. All my equipment had failed. I bought new equipment that wouldn't work. It was... So getting back on focus here, I just wanted to do this recording and let everybody know why this had hit me so hard. He just managed to dredge up all of those feelings. And, to make it all worse, I had the networking trouble. The day I went to pick myself up and dust myself off, I had a problem that prevented me. I really needed to get back and write that day. That was one of those moments. It's like, you just need to get up and do it. And then I couldn't do it. There was a circumstance beyond my control that just eliminated the possibility for me to do it that day. And it all just landed at the wrong time. But that's all I wanted to say. I just wanted to do a quick recording and discuss that. I hope that was insightful. And I will catch you all in the next one. Bye.